If I think of my life as a class and what I've really learned, I've learned a few things. First, I'm aware that I'm a child of God. It's such an amazing understanding to think that the it, which made fleas and mountains and rivers and stars, made me. What I prayed for is humility, to know that there is something greater than I. Then I have to know that the brute, the bigot, and the batterer are all children of God, whether they know it or not. And I'm supposed to treat them accordingly. And it's hard, and I blow it all the time.
Mongrel class of people!
I'd like everybody to think of a statement by Terence. The statement is, I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. If you can internalize the least portion of that, you will never be able to say of an act, a criminal act, or I couldn't do that. No matter how heinous the crime, if a human being did it, you have to say, I have in me all the components that are in her or in him. I intend to use my energies constructively as opposed to destructively. If you can do that about the negative, just think what you can do about the positive. If a human being dreams a great dream, dares to love somebody, if a human being dares to be Martin King or Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Malcolm X, if a human being dares to be bigger than the condition into which she or he was born, it means so can you. And so you can try to stretch yourself. So you can internalize homo sum humani nihila me alienum puto. I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. That's one thing I'm learning.
Wow. Yes, you can say that out loud. I've watched that over and over again the last few days. And I am stretching this morning. I think many of us are stretching to find inside what we need right now. Because I preached the following words last week. I preached last week, whatever the results, no matter who wins or loses, we will have work to do. No matter the results. But who knew what would happen? I didn't. So it was easy to preach the following words. Still, our covenant and our constitution, really a national covenant, matters because it unites us. Even when hurt feelings, wounded pride, or serious disagreements would divide us. Careful what you say. Did your mother ever say that to you? She did to me. I also said, of course, I was confident that my candidate would win. Our American covenant is being tested. If a woman is not elected, then women's full equality will not yet be fully realized. But we know, too, that if a woman is elected, realizing women's full equality will still require years and years of hard work. The people told me I preached a powerful sermon last week. Problem is, my candidate didn't win. So rereading my own words this morning is strong medicine for me. And it may be for some of you as well. Here's just a little more of what I said last week. It's important to remember, so close to an election, that democracy doesn't exist for itself. It exists because it is the political expression of a spiritual ideal or existential truth. So when it feels like our democracy is failing us, it's essential that we remember the ideal or truth it represents and strives to embody. It doesn't go down as easy this Sunday morning. It's the same spiritual ideal we try to live up to together here in this congregation. That we are one human family, each connected to the other, all sharing a common origin and a common destiny. It's the same spiritual ideal we try to live up to as the people of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ouch. It makes me want to take back my words. Almost. Except for the fact that that spiritual ideal or existential truth that Maya Angelou was speaking about a minute ago and that I preached about last week is the same truth that Jesus taught and preached and lived and died for. It's in Matthew chapter 5, 43 to 47. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Ouch. Again. I am so primed and prepared to be a Trump voter hater. Primed and pumped and prepared. And then here comes Jesus. Wrecking it all. It's as if he anticipated this moment in my life and in our lives. It's as if he lived it himself. But of course, he did. He lived in the time of empire, the Roman Empire, and he knew how the powers that be oppressed the poor. He knew how much the people were suffering, that they were hungry and sick and afraid. He knew they had more weapons and more wealth. He knew they had armies and arsenals and that they would turn the guns against the people. He knew they were confident and thought they had total control. He knew He knew they would show no mercy. And still, he preached love. Still, he preached love. So I have been looking for Jesus in my heart this week. And I have been praying for him to take a hold of me. I think it's in Ezekiel. It says, "For whatever is in my heart determines what I say." And I'm convinced that I'm being called, and perhaps you are being called to learn to love in a whole new way. People are saying we've never seen anything like this in history before. And that our nation, at least not in our 250 years of United States American history, and that our nation is facing a huge challenge. After the elections, we know better than before how deeply divided we are by gender, by education, by race, by religion, by whether we live in an urban or a rural setting. But the even bigger problem I'm facing this morning, and maybe some of you are also facing, is that I still believe that we are all part of one human family. I actually don't want to believe it this morning. I am ready to hate, quick to blame, happy to attack. I am primed to protest, picket, and pick fights. I'm bring it on. Or at other times, I'm tempted to pull back, to build my own wall, to stockpile my own weapons, my words of derision and disgust, making myself judge and jury and imaginary executioner, all in a second, except I still believe that we are all part of one human family. And this is still our world, and this is still our country, and this is still our city, and this is still our community, and this is still our church. And there are people in this church who voted differently than I did. And I love them. You do too. How can that be so? And what does it mean? One thing it means, one thing it speaks to, is the power of our covenant. Because in a covenanted community, which is what we are, the most important questions are not what do you believe or who did you vote for, but what do your beliefs call you to do, and who do they call you to become? You know our covenant. We repeat it every week. We seek the truth in love, meaning we ask love to be our guide. We ask love beyond belief to guide us. And our church, we've had this idea of living according to a covenant for a long, long time. But the theory has been tested more fully in the past decade or so as more LGBTQ people have joined this congregation, as more people who were more Christian than many people were used to being with joined this congregation, and as people with varied and various skin tone became members and leaders of this congregation. The thing is, when more and more people see and hear themselves included in our covenant and in our vision, or insist that they are a part of us until we hear them, include here people with different political persuasions and positions, we are taking giant steps towards creating a congregation that more perfectly embodies the spiritual ideal and Jesus' teaching of belonging together to one human family. And to acknowledging, as Maya Angelou said, quoting Terence, "I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me." And this covenanted community. We have had women ministers, black ministers, gay ministers, ministers who are gay and black and trans minister, and now we have a black woman student minister among us. You should clap for that. Year by year, we continue to embody our covenant more and more fully. And I have a dream that our country will too. So I'm asking myself seriously this Sunday morning how I will seek the truth in love in this new reality we now share. And I invite you to ask yourself the same question. How will we seek the truth in love with the neighbors we have now, with the family we have now, with the co-workers we have now, even with the enemies or political opponents we have now? With the blinders off and our eyes wide open, how will we not let fear conquer love in our own hearts and in our own souls? One way is by talking to each other, not past each other, but to each other, head to head or heart to heart, not confusing the two. Pay attention when you're in a conversation. Is this a head conversation or a heart conversation? Because if one person's speaking from the head and you're speaking from the heart, you're going to miss each other. So I got in line early on voting day, and I was leaning up against the wall, and the man behind me started up a conversation without naming it. We knew pretty quickly we were voting for different people. You probably could have told just by looking at us. Every time I made a point that he couldn't disagree with, he'd lower his head and say, I don't know, I guess. Pause, then lift his head and tell me another reason he didn't trust her and was voting for him. He was surprised for a minute, though, when I told him I was a minister. But then I got to hear about how he was shamed by his minister years ago just because of what he wore to church. And so he never went back to church. I told him that would have never happened in our church. He talked about his guns. And when all I said was, I hope you're a responsible gun owner, he told me he was, hesitated as if he were waiting for me to protest some more, and then he went on to tell me about how he loves to hunt. I didn't react, though, and I told him what a good shot I was in 7th grade summer camp when they taught me to shoot a rifle. He looked delighted and kind of confused at the same time. I said I didn't think the Democrats would take away all the people's guns. They just wanted gun owners to be responsible with their guns. He smiled and leaned in a little closer, ready to prod me a little bit further, but I was relaxed and confident because I knew my candidate was going to win. You ever gone hunting, he asked. No, but we raised our own chickens and pigs when we lived on the land, and we did some of the slaughtering on our own, I said without hesitation. It stopped him. I was bursting so many of his democratic, stereotypical thought bubbles, he gave up trying to seduce me into a fight. And since he didn't know what to talk about to trigger me, instead he started telling me about his children and his grandchildren and his black neighbor who was voting for Hillary. He told me about how they teased each other every morning when they went to pick up their papers on the sidewalk. The conversation was helping the time in line pass a little more quickly. He was just starting to say something about a cousin in the family being gay. Can you believe it? He's gay, he was asking me. So we may have gotten into it if we'd had more time, but just then this woman from inside the building came out to talk to us, saying, you're not allowed to discuss politics in line. You're not allowed to try to influence each other's vote. The woman in line in front of me huffed and turned away, whispering something under her breath about me, happy we were being cut off because she had been clearly offended by the conversation up to that point. The man and I turned back to each other like, I wasn't trying to influence you. Were you trying to influence me? Like, no. Just for a minute, we had simply been curious about each other, and it felt really good. Just for a minute, we actually learned something about each other, and it felt really good. I realized since then that I probably never would have talked to that man in my normal day-to-day life. But I'm glad I did. I don't know if you've read Bernie Sanders in the papers yesterday. How many of you have read Bernie Sanders? If you haven't, you need to. His words are a window into the world of people who voted for Trump. This is just a little piece of it. They did so because they are sick and tired of the economic, political, and media status quo. Because working Americans can't afford decent quality childcare for their children. They can't send their kids to college, and they have nothing in the bank as they head into retirement. Too many families exist in despair as drugs, alcohol, and suicide cut life short for a growing number of people. It might not be time yet, but I'm wondering this morning if and when we'll be ready to sit down together within our own church community to listen to each other, to the people who voted for different candidates. It's scary, even to think about today. It's hard to imagine finding common ground, especially when so many people today are feeling more empowered than ever to hate. But if we don't, what then? We need to learn to love in a new way. Without even turning to the news, I've heard at least one story a day of how bigotry and bullying are showing their ugly faces on the streets of Tulsa right now. I have permission from Kayla Torres, who's actually here with us this morning, to tell her story. On Thursday evening, Kayla stopped at Walmart on her way here to provide childcare for one of our programs when a man standing in line in front of her, who was telling the cashier how glad he was that Trump had won, said, you know why they're crying, don't you? It's because, and at this point he turned and waved his finger to point at Kayla and the woman who was standing behind her, all those roaches that have come over are getting ready to get kicked back across the wall. The woman behind Kayla started crying. The man couldn't have cared less, and as he took his receipt saying, I'm tired of paying for their rhymes with sit. Then he leaned into Kayla, looked into her eyes and said, stuff's about to go down in 2017. You watch it go down. So I say to you this morning, hatred is not a Christian value. Hatred is not a Christian value. It's a majority evangelical population who voted Trump into power, but hatred is not a Christian value. I know you're hearing about what's happening across this country right now. The student at OU who was suspended for being involved with a GroupMe email message, have you heard about this? Full of violent images of pictures of lynchings and words sent to black students on the University of Pennsylvania campus, an email that originated here in Tulsa. Have you heard about the man in New York who shouted, "You're next," at a black policewoman, making shooting motions with his hand? And online, there are anonymous users tweeting undocumented immigrants, "Just reported you to ICE, expect a van at your door tomorrow." The 24-year-old teacher in Georgia who got a note from a student that told her that her Muslim headscarf isn't allowed anymore, ending with, "Why don't you tie it around your neck and hang yourself with it? Signed, America." And then there's Jesus. This is hate, pure and putrid. There's more. I know there are more, and if you have your own stories, I hope you will speak up and share them. People are collecting them, and we will stand together. But then there's another one. There's another story I heard. In California, a high school student told a classmate, "You support Trump? You hate Mexicans," before throwing her to the ground and hitting her. That is also hate. And I have felt something akin to it in my own heart. But it's been 5 days now. Can you believe it's only been 5 days? And I've been, like so many of you, rapidly cycling through the grief process. So many times I feel seasick. And there's one thing I've learned about grief that I want to share with you this morning. There's the way most of us were taught, the Kubler-Ross way, 5 stages that end with acceptance. Starts with denial. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and this nightmare is going to be over. They're going to have found 10,000 votes in some bin that they didn't know about. This really is not happening. Don't tell me I'm not the only one who's been there. Anger, depression, bargaining, and then acceptance. But there's another way that we talk about grief today here that I want to share with you. I think it's more realistic. It starts with acceptance. And just acceptance can take 12 to 24 months after the loss of a loved one. Many of us are struggling just to accept that this is what's happening. Then, there's this great acronym for this, TEARS. The T is kind of a fake. So to accept. T is like a T with a little a. To accept. Accept the loss. It's the first step. It can take a long, long time. And then you have to experience the pain. Then you have to experience the pain. And then you're ready for the A, which is to adjust to the new environment with the loss. So you have to accept first, experience the pain, then adjust to the loss, and then you're ready for the R. Then you're ready to reinvest in the new reality. Then you're ready to reinvest in the new reality. And it's plural, it's tears, because that whole process demands that we check our own spirituality, that we check our own faith, that we find the deepest source and inspiration of love in the depths of our own hearts to withstand the hatred and not become haters ourselves. It is a spiritual readjustment, a spiritual path, and an arduous path we know from those who have gone before us. What I've decided in the past 5 days is that no matter what, I want my words to come from a place of love. I don't want to become a hater. I don't want to feel afraid, and I don't want to lose my soul or live a divided life. Because hate not only divides us from each other, but it splits us apart internally, psychologically. It destroys our values and our objectivity, and it confuses truth. So I plan to pray more often. I plan to meditate more often to calm my own fears and center myself in my own faith. I also want my actions to come from a place of love right now, not a place of fear or frustration or impatience. So I'm going to start wearing a safety pin. Yes, some of you have safety pins. I have a bowl of safety pins. I'm going to walk down and pass around. Who wants to help me pass around some safety pins? Somebody want to help me? Thank you. I'm going to wear a safety pin every day from now until January 21st. And I hope you'll join me. I'm going to wear a safety pin for the first 100 days of Trump's presidency, and maybe for the next 4 years. It sounds like some of you. So then, yeah. If there are the next 4 years, what was that about denial? Bargaining. Some of you have obviously heard about these safety pins, but if you haven't heard about them, it's a movement that started in England after the nationalist, isolationist, racist, immigrant-phobic people in that country voted to exit from the European Union. It was the Brexit vote. People started wearing safety pins to show their solidarity with local refugees and immigrants, so that without a word, people would know, simply seeing a safety pin, that this is a friendly face. You are safe with me. I have found sanctuary with you. You are a person who not only preaches and teaches love, but who walks in the ways of love. So I'm going to wear this as a sign of love to show people of color, to show LGBTQ people, Muslim people, immigrants and refugees, and anyone who feels threatened by the hate and fear-mongering of Trump and his supporters that they are not alone, and we will fight together against all isms. And I was thinking this morning that I'm also going to wear it because I'm a white woman, a middle-aged, educated white woman, and I can blend in. I can blend in with the haters. Nobody can see my Jewish blood, but this outs me, and it reminds me that I cannot hide behind silence, which is the greater evil, especially at this time in this country. And I am asking and even expecting my Republican brothers and sisters who voted for Trump, and I think many of us have people in our families, and we're going home to Thanksgiving dinner with people who voted for Trump. I'm going to ask them to wear one too, because the majority of them want jobs, not lawlessness. I'm willing to believe them. The majority of them want a viable economy, not violence. I'm willing to believe them. The majority of them want to have faith in the future, not fistfights, and I'm willing to believe in them. And so they should be willing to wear a safety pin too. This is what my friend Deb in Maine wrote on her Facebook page. To all of you who helped our president-elect gain office, Deb lives in Maine. I think it's the whitest or the second whitest state in the union. She's part of a pretty conservative Christian congregation. To all of you who helped our president-elect gain office, please take some time to show us who you really are. Your faith and your dedication to mercy and justice and unconditional love. If you're Christian, please help everyone around you to see what it truly means to follow the teachings of Jesus, to support the vulnerable and speak up for those who are persecuted. Show us your hearts and the love and kindness I know you all have to share with the world. We need to hear from you now, and we need you to speak loud and clear to anyone who has misinterpreted our new administration as a call to bullying, racism, ostracism, or violence. We need our president-elect's supporters to make sure this administration knows what you want them to do and what you will never, ever tolerate. Hatred is not a Christian value. Love is. Violence is not the way of Christ. Peace is. Racism is not the way of Jesus. Hospitality is. Bullying is not the way of a disciple. Humility is. So we too must practice love and peace, hospitality and humility. I will not let my soul be distorted or destroyed. Will you? Will you? Will you? Will you meet hate with love? Yes. Can we meet hate with love? Yes. We will meet hate with love. Say it with me. We will meet hate with love. May it be so. Amen. You know what? I didn't finish a story. David knew that. Pastor Smith knew that. I have to tell you what happened at the end of Kayla's story. I'm looking at the time. Another man came over from another counter, and he apologized. He said, "I'm so sorry for what happened." And then the two women turned to each other and hugged each other. The man left the store laughing, still filled with hate, but I have this vision of him leaving and laughing, and the vision of these two women and this gentleman apologizing, sharing love. And there's one more story I actually feel like I have to tell you that's about my family in Europe during World War II, my Jewish family who didn't run, they didn't leave, they stayed. And people, Christian people, good Christian people, stood up and hid members of my family. My uncle was hidden at a convent, and that's part of why he survived the war. Let us look for the good in each other, not lose faith, and meet hate with love each and every time. Amen.
We are your church, and we are proud to be your church, or at least a church that's having a positive impact on your life. I am personally blessed to be your minister, or at least a minister who you're allowing to speak into your life. I hope you'll support our ministry and share your love beyond belief by texting LOVEBB to 41444 or go to our website. But you can just text LOVEBB to 41444 and make your gift. It's wonderful. Thank you. Be blessed and be a blessing.